Welcome to this week's edition of New York Now. I'm Dan Clark. Governor Kathy Hochul released her first state budget proposal this week with a price tag of $216 billion. For context, that's more than Florida and Pennsylvania combined. Sure, the state budget is a balance of spending and revenue, and that's really important for pretty much any public service you can think of. But the state budget is also a vehicle for new policy items. Every year, lawmakers and the governor use the state budget as leverage for controversial issues. And it's very much a give and take. Someone will budge on one thing if they can get what they want somewhere else. And very often that involves policy. Last year, it was marijuana. 3 years ago, it was bail reform. So it's a lot more than just spending, but it's also a statement of someone's priorities. For Governor Kathy Hochul, those appear to be education, infrastructure, and healthcare. Take a look. It's not a bad problem to have. For the first time in several years, New York is flush with cash. That's thanks to billions of dollars in pandemic relief money from the federal government and higher tax rates on the wealthy. Governor Kathy Hochul.
Our state is in strong financial position due to a combination of factors: increased tax receipts, a thriving stock market, and an influx of federal aid through the American Rescue Plan and the Infrastructure Act.
The result was Hochul's first executive budget proposal this week, with a price tag of $216 billion. That's an increase of $3.4 billion over last year. And because of New York's strong rise in revenue, the state can afford it. That's according to State Budget Director Robert Mujica.
So the surplus position, in combination with the reserve deposits already planned, makes it possible in this year's budget to really fund new commitments, make investments.
The spending increase will go towards the healthcare industry, a small bump for state agencies, and new money for schools. Hochul's budget would add $2.1 billion in new school spending, an increase of about 7%.
We'll provide more than $31 billion in aid for our schools, continuing our commitment to fully fund education and foundation aid, and that brings us to the highest level the state has invested in education ever.
Hochul's budget would also invest $10 billion in the state's healthcare industry over several years, starting with paid bonuses for workers. Funding would also be directed to hospitals, used to raise Medicaid reimbursement rates, and spent to support managed care.
One of our shared values as New Yorkers is that everyone deserves the dignity of access to quality health care, especially during a public health crisis.
At the same time, Hochul's budget wouldn't raise taxes or fees. Instead, it would speed up tax cuts for middle-income earners. They would take effect next year instead of 2025 under Hochul's plan. And her budget would also set aside about $2 billion for a one-time property tax rebate program. Mujica again.
The rebate checks that's just a way to give back some of the dividend, right, to some of the taxpayers. And the taxpayers that are paying some of the highest taxes, because the highest taxes in New York on individuals are actually the property tax, right, not the personal income tax.
Hochul's budget would also make a major investment in access to high-speed internet. The spending plan would earmark $1.6 billion to expand broadband access. That's separate from Hochul's infrastructure plan, which would direct $32 billion over 5 years for everything from major transit hubs to bumps in the road.
I've also declared war on potholes. So here's the first shot across the bow. A $1 billion plan called Operation POP, Pave Our Potholes. And this strategy takes us from potholes to knotholes.
But critics of Hochul's budget were also quick to say what she left out. After the state's eviction moratorium expired last week, housing advocates were hoping for more rent relief money in Hochul's budget. Instead, the spending plan would put about $2 billion toward undetermined, quote, pandemic recovery initiatives.
And I'll work with the legislature to identify the most impactful use of these funds in the short term, whether that's help for struggling small landlords and their tenants, or the hardest hurt industries and workers, or for other purposes.
Hochul's also not seeking changes to the state's new bail laws in her budget. Republicans have blamed those laws for the state's rise in crime, though there's been no critical analysis on that claim. And while Hochul's budget adds money to law enforcement, Mujica said that funding is geared more toward violence prevention programs.
We want to put these resources in there. It's mostly for non-police resources, right? This is for trying to avoid the violence before it actually happens.
There were also a few obscure but important additions in Hochul's budget. For providers in the human services sector, like mental health and substance use, Hochul's budget would provide a long-sought 5.4% cost of living adjustment to raise their wages and retain staff. And for the childcare industry, Hochul wants to invest $1.4 billion.
This will make 400,000 more families eligible for child care subsidies and will invest more in child care workers as well.